Hello students, we are going to start with lesson 10 today, that is respiration in organisms. In this chapter, we are going to learn about respiration, types of respiration, that is external and internal. In internal respiration, we are going to learn about aerobic and anaerobic respiration. We will also learn about breathing mechanism, respiration in plants, respiration in animals as well as respiration in humans. Now students, we need to understand that all living things respire. Everybody needs to know that respiration is different from breathing. Breathing only means inhale and exhale, whereas respiration is the process that includes breathing. Here we are trying to get the energy from the food. So the movement of air in and out of the body and vice versa is called breathing. Animals like earthworms breathe through their skin. Fishes, because they live in water, they use gills for breathing. Whereas plants exchange gases through tiny pores called stomata, which are present mainly on the underside of the surface of the leaf. So, we need to understand that respiration can be of two main types, aerobic and anaerobic. Aerobic respiration is generally the type of respiration where oxygen is involved. So, we call this as aerobic respiration because oxygen is involved. Whereas the respiration in which oxygen is not involved is anaerobic respiration. So, aerobic respiration occurs in presence of oxygen. So here is the equation for aerobic respiration. Glucose is generally broken down with the help of oxygen to give carbon dioxide, water and energy. Energy is the key in this process. The purpose of doing respiration is that living organisms obtain energy. So we get the oxygen when we breathe in air and then we use that oxygen to break down glucose to produce energy, water and carbon dioxide. In our body, the energy is produced in form of ATPs, which is the energy currency of our cell. Now students, let us learn about anaerobic respiration. So anaerobic respiration is the type of respiration which occurs in absence of oxygen. In animals, the glucose is broken down to form lactic acid plus energy is released, whereas in yeast the glucose is broken down and ethanol, carbon dioxide and energy is released. Now one thing that we need to understand is anaerobic respiration only occurs in body when there is no oxygen available. The energy produced over here is much less as compared to aerobic respiration. So the body would always prefer aerobic respiration over anaerobic respiration. But when we do vigorous exercise or any other physically exhausting activity, our body has to switch to anaerobic respiration because of the absence of oxygen. In such scenarios, the glucose is broken down to give lactic acid and very little energy is produced. Whereas, we also use this respiration commercially in organisms like yeast, where they are used to break down glucose to get ethanol, carbon dioxide and energy. The alcohol obtained by such an aerobic respiration by yeast is used commercially and sold on a very wide scale. Now let us understand where it is actually used. So this anaerobic respiration is used to make beer, in which the brewer's yeast, which is a special type of yeast, is used to break down glucose and produce alcohol. Now let us also try and understand where is this anaerobic respiration useful in our body. So as we saw earlier, when the body runs short of oxygen, it switches to anaerobic respiration, in which glucose is broken down to produce lactic acid and some amount of energy. Now you need to understand that lactic acid is acidic, so the body cannot keep it for a very long time as it would alter the pH of the body. So it is essential that the body breaks down this lactic acid. So after a person has completed the exercise, generally this lactic acid is broken down by the body with the help of oxygen. Otherwise, the person will have cramps in their body. So you might have felt it when you do vigorous exercise. After that exercise, you generally feel a burning sensation in your body. This burning sensation is nothing but lactic acid. So this can be easily cured with the help of some massage or taking a hot or a cold shower. Now let us understand the breathing and cellular respiration differences. So breathing, as I said, is only inhaling and exhaling. We are inhaling oxygen and exhaling carbon dioxide. Whereas cellular respiration actually involves the using of oxygen, which is inhaled during breathing to produce energy. The normal breathing rate in an adult is 15 to 18 times in a minute. Whereas in cellular respiration, oxidation is involved because here glucose is broken down with the help of oxygen. So no energy is released during breathing, whereas we can say that breathing is a part of cellular respiration which is used by the body to produce ATPs, that is energy currency of the cell. Now children, have you ever wondered why do you yawn? Well, generally our body prefers yawning when there is a lack of oxygen in our body. So in order to get oxygen, our body yawns so that all our organs become very active. Now let us understand the structure of the human respiratory system. So the human respiratory system mainly consists of the nose, the pharynx, the nasal cavity. Then below pharynx we have trachea, then we have bronchus, then bronchioles, then we have the lungs, and then we have the diaphragm. So when we inhale, the air enters through the nose, it goes to the pharynx, to the trachea, bronchus, bronchioles, which further break down, and then it generally goes down. The exchange of air in the lungs occurs with the help of alveoli which are present in the lungs. Here the oxygen is taken in and carbon dioxide is taken out. This is how the body decides to exchange the air. And this is also useful because oxygen is needed by all the organs of the body. So children, now let us learn about the mechanism of breathing in humans. So what happens when we breathe and how do we breathe? We need to understand that. In order to learn that, we have to be aware of the respiratory system in our body, which we already learned. So now let us know how do we actually breathe. So when we inhale, the air goes from our nostrils to the nasal cavity and then it reaches lungs through the windpipe. Lungs are generally present in the chest cavity and a large muscular sheet called diaphragm is present below this chest cavity. So during inhalation, the ribs will move up and out and the diaphragm moves down. This increases the space in the chest cavity and the air rushes in the lungs. So because of this, the lungs get filled with air. Whereas when we exhale, the ribs move down and inwards while the diaphragm moves up in its original position. So this reduces the size of the chest cavity and the air is pushed out of the lungs. These movements in our body can be felt easily if you try to take a deep breath. So you can see here how the air travels through our respiratory system. From the nostril, it will go to the trachea, then to the bronchi, then it breaks up into bronchioles, and then we have structures called alveoli. These alveoli look like a bunch of grapes, and it is in this alveoli that the exchange of the gases occurs. Children, we can do a small activity to show inspiration and expiration. You can take a bottle and attach a rubber sheet below it, and then you can attach a tube and two balloons attached to the tube. So in this activity, the bottle represents the ribs, the balloons represent the lungs, and the rubber sheet represents the diaphragm. So when we inspire air at that time, we have to pull the diaphragm down, so the lungs will blow. And when we leave the diaphragm, that shows expiration. So the balloons deflate, that is when our lungs deflate and all the air rushes out. We can do one more activity so that the air which rushes out is carbon dioxide. So we can take some lime water for this activity, and with the help of a straw we can breathe out. In presence of carbon dioxide, the lime water turns milky. So if in this activity the lime water turns milky, that means carbon dioxide is present. Now let us try to understand how does breathing occur in animals like fish which live under water. So these animals cannot breathe through lungs because they have to live under water. So they have a special structure called gill which helps them to breathe underwater. The gills are well supplied with blood vessels, and that is how the fishes will take in dissolved oxygen and they are easily able to survive underwater. Now let us understand about the tracheal system in insects. So these insects have openings called spiracles. They have a network of air tubes called trachea which is responsible for the gas exchange. So what happens here is oxygen rich air rushes through the spiracles into the tracheal tube, and it diffuses into the body tube and reaches every cell of the body. Similarly, the carbon dioxide from the cells goes into the tracheal tubes and moves out through the spiracle. These air tubes or trachea are found only in insects and not any other group. Now let us understand how do plants respire. So plants also take in oxygen and give out carbon dioxide. In the cells, the oxygen is used up to break down the glucose, and CO2 and water are used for other life processes. This is the exact opposite of photosynthesis. The air enters and leaves through tiny holes called stomata which are generally present in the plants. Let us summarize about what all we have learned in this chapter. So we learned that respiration is essential for survival of living organisms. It releases energy from the food. The oxygen we inhale is used to break down glucose into CO2 and water, and energy is released in this process. The breakdown of glucose occurs in the cells of an organism. There are two types of respiration: external respiration or breathing, and internal respiration or cellular respiration. We also learned about respiration in plants. The leaves have pores called stomata. We also learned about respiration in animals. Respiration in animals are varying according to their character, like the earthworms breathe through their skin, the insects through their entire body surface, fishes respire through their gill, frogs through their thin, moist, smooth skin when they are in water, and by lungs when they are in land. Respiration in humans involves inhaled air which passes through the nostrils into the nasal cavity and then into the lungs through the windpipe.